So welcome everyone to our May webinar. This is our third webinar in the XtremeLabs 2022 webinar series. Thank you for being here, and this is being recorded. So we'll be uploading this webinar to our website after it's complete. So I'll just do a quick intro. My name is Judy Jung, and I am the Director of Product at XtremeLabs. And at XtremeLabs, we've been providing hands-on virtual labs to tens of thousands of learners over the years. They've come from over 160 different countries. And I'm always happy to talk more about our mission and what we do. And you can always email info@extremelabs.io to learn more. And today I am so thrilled that our webinar is for the academic community. XtremeLabs has a long history working with academic learners and institutions. And just a short sample list is we partner with traditional book publishers to provide lab bundles with their books and their content. We also partner with college bookstores like Barnes & Noble so that our partner colleges and universities and their students are able to get a virtual practice environment as they learn about their technology topics. And we also work directly with universities and community colleges as well as technical colleges. And we've had some really great relationships with college instructors and professors over the years. Which really brings us to today's panel. Now, before we jump in, I did want to just talk really quickly about some exciting updates on our platform. So our next webinar will be about our recent updates for our MS Learn integration. So please keep an eye out for that. We'll be doing a demo and also talking about how that affects all of our learners and our partners. I also wanted to just briefly mention that we've had some new reporting updates lately. And that will be rolled out in the next few months to some of our partners first as we gather some feedback and eventually out to all of our users. Also a quick mention of EXL 2022. This will be our second annual conference. Our theme, as with last year, is experiential learning for all. And registration is currently open. The conference will start on July 26th. Currently, we're anticipating a 2 or 3 day conference. And just some of the topics that we'll be covering include emerging technology, training best practices, upskilling your workforce, Microsoft, AWS, CompTIA, and VMware certification paths, as well as how to prepare for the future of work, which is something that we wrestle with at XtremeLabs on a daily basis. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and start introducing our panelists. So first, I'm really pleased to welcome Dr. Rasha Elhage, who is an associate professor of special education at Chicago State University. She has a PhD from Wayne State University in Educational Evaluation and Research, a master's in special education, and a bachelor's also in special education. And she has been working in the special education field for over 16 years as a special ed teacher. She's worked in public schools as well as a consultant in school reform and international assessment. She's worked internationally in the Middle East and currently teaches now in Chicago. She has a variety of research interests as well. And as we get started with the panel, I'll ask her to talk a little bit more about her background. So welcome, Rasha. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction. As I always present myself, I am a former and forever special education teacher. I started my career as a special education teacher, working with students who had intellectual disabilities, and then, moved on to working in resource rooms, working with all types of disabilities, autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, the whole spectrum. And after spending almost 16 years in the classroom, I worked on projects in the Middle East that looked at reforms in schools, and we worked in different countries in the Middle East, and I also worked in international assessment, looking at scores, student scores, and developing national reports for the countries of Qatar and the UAE. And finally, I came back to the United States, and now I am working on at Chicago State University as one of their faculty in the special education department.
Thanks so much, Rasha. We are so pleased to have you here.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Tarek Bacha, who is based out of Lebanon. He is the founder of ITIL Certiport Lebanon partner. He's also the CEO of Tablet Academy of Middle East and North Africa. And he's also a Microsoft Global Training Partner in education, as well as a member of multiple non-governmental organizations. He's been a Microsoft certified trainer, as well as an MCT regional lead. And he's obviously also taught at universities, which is why he's here today. He has a very long list of certifications, which I'll let him explain in a little bit. And we are really excited to welcome him here because he's really dedicated to helping people succeed through applying technology in their education, as well as in their classrooms. And he's had a variety of academic as well as professional experience outside of the classroom as an instructor and as a technology innovator. So Tarek, we're really happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you for having me with you in this webinar. And my name is Tarek Bacha. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer from 20 years. And as a technology trainer in multiple technology field, I think that's I apply this training and mapping the academic study with the courses, the marketing, the business market and the job market in the Middle East with the certification. So my job is to map the academic courses with the industrial certification like Microsoft or Google or other industrial certification. And happy to be with you, and sure I will learn a lot from my colleagues here, and I will share my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tarek. Our third panelist is Christine Marsh, and she wears a wide variety of hats. In fact, after getting to know her bio a little bit more and trying to what sort of topics she'd be interested in talking about, I thought, well, she can probably talk about anything. So she is a media producer. She's worked in a variety of creative roles in production and as a consultant. She's also a marketing consultant. And she's also managed to spend some time working at universities and colleges, helping to direct training sessions, professional development centers, and she's also worked with some private clients. So Christine, I'm sure that you'll be able to provide a much more cohesive narrative of your journey and how you got to where you are than I can. So I'll let you go ahead and do that.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here. I appreciate it. I actually have been doing the work that I do for about 25 years, running a design and media production company. As part of that, I do consult and all the things that you mentioned. But I've been teaching classes on the things that I do in my business, whether that's animation or video production or web design or graphic design or business types of programs like Microsoft programs and project and things like that, because those are all things that I use day to day running my business. And I am very enthusiastic in sharing all of those things to other people to give them an opportunity for either running their businesses more efficiently, but also if they're a creative professional, to enjoy the same tools and techniques that I've been using for a long time. I wanted to add, though, that I actually got my start really early on doing similar work to Dr. Elhage. I actually started working with people with disabilities in my early days before I started teaching adults and professionals. And I also used to teach preschool. So those are my early starts. But I carried my love of teaching people with disabilities and being an advocate for them through to today. And I also teach 508 compliance. So for anybody not from the States, it's the Americans with Disabilities Act. 508 compliance is a section that requires all content to be universally accessible when it's distributed out into the world. So I'm constantly talking to people about those same topics that got me started in the education business. So thank you very much for the introduction.
So much, Christine. I'm really excited to explore all of that a little bit more in the panel, and thank you also so much for being here. So I just wanted to say to anyone who joins later on, as well as our current participants, feel free to put any questions you have in our meeting chat, and we'll definitely try to get to those during this panel. So my first question to all of our panelists is, what inspires you to teach and to teach in academic classrooms? Can you tell us about what in your career path led you there, and a little bit more about the journey of, whether was it always the goal to teach in academic classrooms, or is that something that just became part of the journey as you progress in your career? So Dr. Elhage, maybe you could get started with that.
Sure. So I always felt that I needed to be the voice for those who didn't have a voice. When I was, even before graduating high school, I always felt like, I needed to defend those who were the weakest. And that's what got me into special education, especially because I started in the Middle East. I started in Lebanon, and over there it wasn't, the field wasn't as developed as it is in other countries. So I got into special education, and I loved it. I still love it. I'm very passionate about the profession. So that's how I started in the classroom as a special education teacher. But then, as I progressed, I moved from teaching elementary to moving middle school to teaching middle school. And then I ended my classroom teaching career K through 12 at the high school level. And I got a taste of what it means to teach older kids. And I'm like, okay. So when I got my PhD, for me, the natural path was just, to get into higher ed. And I love it. I love what I do, and I love being in the classroom. And I think teaching is an art, and the classroom is your stage. So it's a very satisfying and rewarding profession for me.
Tarek, would you like to go next? What inspired you to become an instructor in academic classrooms, and can you tell us more about how that intersected with your career path?
So because my career is about to support people, I start supporting them by educate them about technology, about privacy, security, and then I start learn more about how to train people. So I began my training from 20 years, and now I become a university instructor, and also I start to use my knowledge to teach other teachers how to use technology in a classroom, how to use technology in the best way in education. So the main reason is the passion to help people.
All right, thanks, Tarek. Really appreciate you sharing that passion with us. And Christine, how about you?
Well, I actually got started teaching in the classroom early on. I was actually still still kind of a kid myself. I was helping out at camp for people with disabilities as a teenager, and then while I was still in college, I was working at the job where I was teaching preschool and at the same time teaching people with disabilities and helping them with their habilitation. But it actually was a natural progression. When I started my business a few years later as design and media production, my very first client wanted me to come into their company and teach their staff how to use the tools that I use to create an interactive exhibit for them. It was for a museum because they needed to be able to maintain the project that I created. They only had the budget for me to create it, not to maintain it. So that was one of my very first customers, and that became pretty common for my clients to ask me to train their staff to maintain or do the same kind of work that I was doing. It was sort of training myself out of future work with those companies, but it was worth it because they were very appreciative, and I think more people being able to do this kind of work in the world is a good thing. So I'm happy to tell anyone who will listen. So and I sort of carried that through to today. If you talk to my students, you'll probably hear that I'm a very enthusiastic instructor because I just really enjoy what I'm doing, and I try to pass that passion and enthusiasm on to my students.
So I'm actually going to take this in a slightly different direction, since we have two professors, instructors with a special education background. And so I'd like to ask, what are some of the main challenges of teaching those with special education needs, for those who have disabilities? How do you view that in the context of technology, the tools that we use in the classroom? And what do you think about, how the technology world kind of approaches accessibility? So Christine, would you like to start?
Sure, absolutely. I actually do regularly have students on the spectrum in my college classes, and I do tutoring on the side, although you wouldn't think I would have time to do anything on the side, but I actually do tutoring as well. And a lot of the students that I take in the tutoring sessions are also students that have a learning disability or attention disability or something along those lines. I find that usually they need a different approach. The group approach, while it's good to have them in the mainstream classroom so that they're able to experience the same sort of college life as other students, they usually need a little additional attention. And so what I'll do is schedule one-on-one sessions with them to help them through any parts that they're having difficulty with. And sometimes they're supposed to basically self-identify at the beginning of the semester to say that they have some learning disabilities, and they don't always. They're sometimes a little embarrassed. So sometimes it's up to me to identify people who are struggling and offer to help them one-on-one without really putting a label on it. And I think that usually goes a long way to making them feel comfortable. But on the point of content that's accessible to students, that's sort of the windmill I've been running at for a long time. I think a lot of content is not accessible. So even when I'm teaching classes for Excel and PowerPoint and other programs like InDesign, I'm constantly mentioning that it's important to create content that you're putting out into the world, even if you're not required by law to do it, but to create it in a universal way, to keep that in mind as you're designing it, because it's really just a good global citizen thing to do, even, for any type of outcome. There's a large part of training also that I think should be accessible that isn't, even down to people with disabilities that most people don't consider a disability, like colorblindness. So I'll try not to get too much on my soapbox about that, but there's a lot of people who don't consider it if it doesn't touch their lives on a day-to-day basis. And that's something that I try to put across to all of my students, to keep that in mind as they're creating content to put out into the world. So does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Elhage?
So I think Christine covered covered a large portion of the answer. But like she said, you know, in higher ed, students with disabilities have to self-identify, and many of them don't. So we end up in classrooms with students who might have disabilities, but we're not aware, like officially aware of. You know, as with our special education background, we can feel it, but we can't really address it because we don't have the official paperwork. So one of the ways that we can address that is through our instructional design, especially for those online courses, and using the universal design for learning principles, because this way, when we design the course in a way that addresses different learners' needs and, you know, presents different types of engagement and different types of presentations, then even those who did not identify as needing additional supports or accommodations can have their learning needs met. So I think it's really important for faculty in higher ed to be trained in universal design for learning principles, and it should become a culture across the university for everyone to adopt those principles so that they can reach the most students, and you know, we can have a higher success rate of our students.
So I want to talk about instructional design principles and technology tools and different ways of learning in a minute. But first, I want to just broaden the scope of this conversation and ask, you know, why is it important to have technology subjects in higher ed and in colleges and universities? You know, why is it so important that these subjects are offered in the first place? Let's see, Tarek, would you like to go first?
Sure, but before I want to add to my colleagues that accessibility tools. I don't train or teach a student with a special need, but I teach teachers and train teachers using the accessibility tools, free accessibility tools, in productivity tools like OneNote, Immersive Reader, and the reader in the browser, VR. Those tools are most of the times free to use in the classroom, even if not special need classroom. But we can use this to help a student with a special need to read, to know more information, or use the technology to get more knowledge using these features. Like I said, that like the immersive reader, for example. Going back to your question, using technology in the classroom, we have two types of technology, used technology in the classroom. Teacher use the technology, so the student can understand more about the subject when we are using technology with them, like let's say like labs, virtual labs. So it's very important for a student to use this technology, and that other type of technology to prepare our student for the market. So the two type is very important. Teacher using technology in the classroom, so it's to let student use the like, let's say it's to use a real example, a real life example. From my side, I'm using technology like virtual lab, so a student can see the servers, the new technology, the VR, the AI, all of this in my classroom, without a huge budget. In another side, I map and merge technology into my classes, so my student can have more degree, more certification in this way, so they can go to the market ready for the new challenge in our market.
So Tarek, you covered that question from a wide variety of angles. I really liked how you said that, first of all, you know, you're enabling technology learning in your classroom so that your students can use these subjects later on to get certified, basically to have successful outcomes in their career. But then on the other hand, you're also enabling these tools because technology helps you learn technology too. I do want to follow up on that in a little bit, but I also wanted to ask Christine the same question. Why is it important to be teaching technology in the classroom? Why is it important to have technology as a subject matter?
Thanks. I actually do teach quite a lot of technology classes, even though in the 2 colleges where I'm teaching right now, I teach for the fine art department. So you wouldn't think that I'd be teaching a lot of technology, but actually quite a lot of what I'm teaching these days is a crossroads between game technology and VR, AR, and animation and filmmaking. And one of the things that I'm working actively to bring to the university are more resources to be able to teach basically the bleeding edge technology to these students. I work for both a community college and a university, and the university where I teach is an HBCU. And for anybody who's maybe not from the US, HBCU is a historically Black college and university. And it's so important for especially students from backgrounds where historically they might not have had access to this kind of technology, to the bleeding edge or cutting edge technologies that would make them competitive in the market. I think it's really important to introduce and promote those kinds of skills, because anybody who's able to learn those skills in college right now is going to have a leg up on the competition. And even people who are currently working in the market, if they don't have access to learning these new skills, these things change so often, so quickly, that you have to constantly be learning, honestly, to be competitive. So the students coming out of colleges that feature these types of tools will actually be more competitive in the market than people who had been in their fields for many years, because the new students have, or the new graduates have, that information. But the topics that are really in demand, or the skills, I suppose, that are really in demand, are things like Unity and Unreal Engine, and being able to create this kind of real-time technology and Web3 technologies. That's something that's a lot of companies are looking for. And whenever I attend like educational conferences and things like that, the thing that I hear most is that there aren't enough people available to hire in those industries, that they're desperate for new people to hire, and really enthusiastic about colleges offering these types of skills. So, did that answer your question?
Yes, that was great, Christine. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've been hearing. As XtremeLabs is a technology provider, we provide technology experiences in the classroom, but then every day we're evaluating, what types of technology should we be focusing on? What is most useful for our learners who are either taking their first steps into the workforce, or have been in the workforce for a number of years, but now are looking to either retrain or upskill, so that they can remain and be even more competitive. So that's a really good point about how, in today's world, sometimes being familiar with and then being up to date on the latest technology can be the difference between a thriving career versus one where you're sort of seeing new entrants to the job market who may have a leg up on you. And that actually does bring me to my next question, which is, Christine, you mentioned that there's a lot of emerging tech that you are advocating for in the classroom. You mentioned VR, AR, in the production world. these sorts of things that we would consider to be bleeding edge tech. I know Tarek, you also mentioned you try to bring AI into your classroom. You know, what kinds of what do you use to figure out what is most important for your students to learn, and how do you go about figuring out what the next trend is, or if let's not call it a trend, how do you figure out what is useful for your students to be learning now in your classroom, so that outside of the classroom they can be successful, productive, fulfilled? So Dr. Elhage, would you like to start with that?
Sure. So I don't necessarily teach technology. I don't teach a technology class, but I use technology in my teaching. Since we are a state university, we use what is available. We have limited resources. So, we use whatever LMS we have. And I try to, it's really important to model to our future teachers and our future special education teachers how to use this technology in our higher ed courses, but sometimes it's very difficult because of the lack of resources. For example, we have Promethean boards, like those white smart boards at our college, but they're outdated. We don't necessarily have the funds to repair them. So it becomes difficult to model, but we try as much as possible to use anything that's free. Because there are a lot of free resources out there, and incorporate them into our coursework so that we show our teachers, like, okay, even because most of our teachers also work in Title I schools, and they work in, they teach students who come from very low social economic background. So they as well don't have resources. So we try to focus on everything that's free out there and incorporate it into our lesson plans, because access to knowledge nowadays is through technology. And if you want to share any knowledge, it has to be through technology. Like, you can't live, having technology literacy is a must nowadays if you want to survive anywhere in any employment, and even outside the context of employment, you need that technology literacy.
Thanks. I really liked what you said about how access to knowledge today is through technology. I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. It seems like the previous skills of finding things in books or through your network, through word of mouth, has declined a little bit, because now the response is usually, well, just Google it, or you can search for anything online and instantly become a lot more of an expert than you could previously. And so I absolutely agree with you. Technology literacy is absolutely necessary. Let's see. Tarek, you had mentioned before that you use AI in your classroom. Can you expand on that a little bit? Just talk about how these cutting edge tools, or how you help your students stay on that bleeding edge of making sure they're technologically literate.
Sure. My last classroom in university, it was about it's a finance year, first year in finance in our university. So I am teaching them let's say chart analysis, Excel, advanced Excel. So I merge some of Microsoft tools like Power BI and artificial intelligence, so they can get most of the information from their data using the artificial intelligence and let's say that like smart formulas and other things using Power BI. I push new technology in my classroom when I see in the market, in the local market and the global international market, that they need to use it in daily work. So let's say I am a student at the first year of university. I had 3 or 4 years in the future to graduate. In this 4 years in technology, that means 100 years of new technology has been applied in the market. So we need to prepare our students student to compete in the new market, in the new technology. What I do because I am I'm technology expert and partner with multiple technology provider in my region. I use my knowledge, my contact, my network, so to see what is the new technology to apply. So I'm using, let's say, Azure AI in my classroom, so they can apply it. And most of the company now provide a free account, free educational accounts, free tools. As Dr. Rasha said, the free tools are most important for students. Not all students, not all university can provide this for their students. So I use my free, even my free accounts so they can apply the knowledge, the skills, and when they go out to the market, they can compete with other students, let's say. One more point that in our school here in Lebanon, let's say, old school, because university built on the school skills. So student graduate from the school going to the university, they think that they have all the knowledge about, let's say, the small things, PowerPoint, Excel. That's not right. So in Lebanon, we start to pushing technology through competition. We engage about 3,000 students now from 4 years and until now. 3,000 students have been certified as an Excel specialist in Lebanon by competition. So when we see the competition, the market or competition as a championship, it will provide students the way or the need to have a certificate. So, and they will push their skills to extreme. Universities in this way can engage certifications and skills into their, let's say, into their. In my expertise with university here in my country, it's very challenge to do this, because university as academic institute don't want to have the same level of certificate or skills. But from now on, they need to emerge and map this skills into their courses, because if they need to have if they need to compete in the market, the business market, they need to have the new technology in their courses. So from my side as an instructor, I use this knowledge to embed in my academic courses, so my students have more knowledge, more information to compete in the market.
Thanks very much for that, Tarek. I think that is just spot on once again. And, I especially found it just really resonating to hear what you said about, looking at the local market, teaching technology in your classroom. When students enter the classroom for, 3 to 4 years in a university, that can mean 100 years of change in what's going on in the outside world. So it is just so important to make sure that we're staying on track or staying on the cutting edge of that. So next, I wanted to just ask all three of you to share some stories of teaching challenges you faced in the classroom. I guess I should say in the classroom or even a little bit outside of it. What are some ways, some different challenges that an academic instructor might face, and how did you overcome those? Christine, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would. And I would like to come back around to the last question that you asked that I didn't get a chance to answer, but we can come back to that later. The challenges in the classroom I found, aside from the obvious, where we a couple of years ago had to switch from doing everything in person to doing everything online, that the college and the students were not prepared to do. One of the biggest hurdles, I think, for maybe almost every one of my students is the technology. It's having access to the right kind of computer, even a decent bandwidth, internet connection, because they might come from modest means. They don't have, a lot of resources to put toward a really good laptop or, a better internet connection because what's available in their neighborhood is just not great. That's a topic that comes up in almost every faculty meeting where, how else can we help our students be successful in these classes? And it's not just my classes. This is something that all the teachers and all the students in the university are having a struggle with, and the community college too. It does happen that the content that I teach most often is the most demanding for the laptop to run, of course. So I teach, advanced 3D modeling and animation and XR development and game engine development and design. So there's a lot asked of the computer for the classes that I teach most often. But we're getting similar answers from people who are teaching programs that are much less stressful to the computer, and it's just an ongoing challenge. There's even in a university where they try to make access to the content as universal as possible and as accessible as possible, it's still a challenge getting it to everybody. Some of the students are farther away. There is a laptop loaner program. Unfortunately, the laptops that are loaned out are still woefully underpowered. So that's a challenge we're constantly trying to find a creative solution for. I have been looking at cloud computing as a possible option to maybe, as long as the students have an internet connection, that they would be able to access a computer online or through the internet and run their software sort of virtually that way. It is actually something that a lot of studios, like movie studios and animation studios, are using for remote teams, production teams. So that's a possibility and something that we're exploring. But grants are always helpful. Looking for grants that will help provide the hardware for the students to be able to do the classes that they need to do. But right now, I guess that's the challenge that's at the top of mind. There are other challenges, certainly, for students that struggle to learn online, that really need a face-to-face component, that prefer to not only learn hands-on, but to have a person in the room before they feel like they're really learning. And that's the feeling of presence, I think, for the students is a bit of a challenge. Not for all, but for some that have expressed that concern to me. So for those students, I do think that possible future solutions might be classes in a virtual world where they might feel more of a presence than they do in something like a Zoom meeting, which is how most classes currently are conducted. So that's something else that we're looking into.
Thanks so much, Christine.
Sure.
Tarek, what about you? What are some stories of teaching challenges that you faced?
That the most challenging thing that's to balance between different learning needs of my students. So each student have a way to study and different needs to learn. Here in Lebanon, we have lots of challenges regarding economic situation, electricity, internet, all of this, and the COVID in the past 2 years. So my way to face this challenge is to have a hybrid teaching or hybrid training using remote training and on-site training, let's say, and to record my sessions so I can share it offline, my videos with my student. So the basic things with the challenge that I facing in my teaching classroom, that's not all the students can get the information from my side. They cannot come to the classroom, or they cannot connect to the internet, and all of these challenges. Using my expertise in technology, I succeed to work around this challenge. We cannot eliminate all the challenges, but we can work around most of them. So I use a hybrid training, or that is in education, and it's called the hybrid training. That's I record my videos. I use Teams most of the time, so they can, when they can connect to the internet, they can see the videos. If they are totally offline, they can get my video from the university or from the school, and they can watch the video. Then we come back to another session to discuss and to have some questions and answer over my training.
Sounds like hybrid teaching is, hybrid learning is a really important part of your classroom teaching. Dr. Elhage, how about you? What are some stories of teaching challenges?
So in addition to what Christine and Tarek has shared, which we're all experiencing in higher ed, I think one of the challenges is about students not being able to manage their time when taking online courses, and that's I've had like recurrent challenges with this issue, and where you have to, people going into online classes for the first time don't necessarily know what to expect, especially if we don't tell them what to expect. So one of the things that I find it's important to explain at the beginning of the course is the difference between face-to-face and online courses, and what are the expectations, what are the skills that are needed, because also we sometimes assume that students have the skills needed to use certain types of technology. And I'll give you an example. Like, one of the assignments that I had is to create a podcast for one of my online classes, and I had assumed that my students knew what a podcast is and how to create a podcast. Well, I was wrong. And, I had to backtrack and say, okay, I operated from this assumption, but now let me backtrack and let me give you specific directions onto what to do, where to go, how to develop this before I grade you on your assignment. So those are some of the challenges that, I have faced. And of course, in addition to, technology challenges for students who do not have access to internet or a suitable computer, but also sometimes lack of engagement, because if the faculty does not have that online presence and requires that cognitive presence from the students, then the students are just taking the course online using whatever technology you're asking them to use to pass the course, and not necessarily to acquire that knowledge and skills that you are trying to achieve through this course.
Thanks very much, Dr. Elhage. So I do want to get back just briefly to instructional design principles. And just wanted to ask if any of the three of you wanted to share any thoughts on how you approach instructional design to best, fit the needs of your students, and any other thoughts around how you design a curriculum, and how you give the assignments to the students. Does anybody want to speak up about that?
I can go if you want. Yeah. So I actually I do instructional design as a professional development instructor, as well as for the courses that I teach through the universities. And recently I've been involved in writing new curriculum for the university for a new degree that we're offering, which is in, as you might guess, game design, XR, and entertainment design. And this actually kind of circles back around to the question that you asked earlier about how do we know what is in demand? How do we know what skills need to be taught, and you know, exactly like what content the students need to come away with? And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll work backward from the outcome. Like, what do they need to know in order to be successful in a career? If they were going to go get a job as the day after they graduate, what things do they need to know to get the job versus somebody else who maybe didn't have the benefit of going to a school that was offering this content? And I actually have met with a lot of people running studios, and whenever I'm in an environment like this as a not a panelist, but as an attendee, there's always a Q&A at the end. And so I'm always the person asking questions, always the person with my hand up. Just like when I was in school, I think a lot of teachers were that kid when they were in classes in school. But the idea is that those people that are on the panels are the people who are leading the charge in the field. You know, they're the people, you know, defining the technology, they're the people defining the trends. And it's really important to understand what the pain point is for the people hiring out in the world. What are they finding is lacking in the current cohort of students that are graduating and trying to get their first job in the industries? And that's a question I ask in almost every webinar and workshop that I go to is, what skills do you think are important for students to have when they graduate? And then I build some of the curriculum based on that. But I also do a lot of research with the companies that make the technology that I use in the classroom. And there's lots and lots of resources online for educators to do the same thing. I actually put a couple things in the chat that I'm going to send right now. So there are 3 resources that I put into the chat. There's an Unreal Engine .com for educators. Now, the one that I put in there was for the US, but there you can also go to Unreal Engine's website and find education resources for other areas of the world. But that company, as well as Unity, has a lot of programs that that are meant to support instructors, K through 12, as well as college instructors, so that they can teach this successfully in the world. And there are even opportunities for you to develop curriculum based on this technology. And there are grants for people to bring this technology into their university, into their K through 12 schools. So I put a link to the EPIC Mega Grant application or article and application in there too. So hopefully that's helpful. Maybe for Dr. Elhage, who mentioned that her state university is constantly underfunded. My university is also a state university, so I totally understand. But I've spoken to the people at EPIC who offer this grant, and I mentioned to them that that we're developing this curriculum. In fact, we're even doing a research project over the summer to sort of kick the tires on the curriculum that we're developing, to do sort of a mini project over the course of the summer. And they said that's exactly the sort of thing that they offer the mega grant for. So hopefully that'll be useful information for somebody out there who's trying to bring technology into their classrooms. So
thank you so much for sharing that resource, Christine, and good luck, I guess, to anyone who is applying for that grant. It seems like a great resource. Well, we just have a few minutes left, so I'll end with this final question, which is, you know, we've been circling around the central topic of what can we do in classrooms to create a workforce that is ready to meet the challenges of the future. That's been the central theme at XtremeLabs. It's the central theme of this webinar, and it's this and some other related questions. That's what we're going to be tackling at our conference later on this summer. So, you know, in a sentence or two, do you have any final thoughts, any advice for teachers, advice for universities, or advice for students? Let's see, Dr. Elhage, shall we start with you?
Well, I really think that we need to have a clear definition of what online learning means for faculty and learners, and share those expectations. And I also think that we really need to invest in the infrastructure of online learning and the technology that is required for a successful online environment, because the online demand is only growing. If there was a report that was published by the American Association of State Colleges and Universities about online learning at public universities, and it was recently published in 2022, and it says that the number of institutions with 5 or more online program increased from 48% in 2013 to 76% in 2022. So these are numbers that we cannot ignore. We need to invest into this infrastructure, and we need to have a buy-in culture of faculty who usually have low acceptance of this change, and show them that, you know, this is the future. This is where we're heading.
Yeah. Tarek, how about you? Any final thoughts or advice?
So, because our life is changing, our technology is changing, and learning is changing a lot in these few years, I think that we need to think how to prepare our students and our community to find the right skills for tomorrow. So to prepare them for the future, and to prepare because it's all about our environment, our community, our economy. So the main thing that we need to push it is to how to prepare our new generation for future skills. What is the right skills? What is the right technology? If we are talking about only technology for the future, what is the right technology to invest and learn and educate our student, so they can help to solve any future problem.
Thanks so much, Tarek. And Christine?
And actually, I would echo something that Tarek just mentioned. I think a lot of the key of using technology as a tool, and also as a basically as a tool set for doing more work in the future, so both in the classroom and in life, is understanding how it works. So I think an important thing to show students is how to problem solve, how to figure out what's missing, to find the resources if they're lacking, and basically empowering them to be their own teacher, so that they continue their education far beyond leaving your classroom, because they're going to need to be lifelong learners, especially with technology, because it is always changing. And everybody here can probably attest to the fact that we're lifelong learners. That's a part of the job, is to be a professional learner. But even students that don't go into education, they still need to stay up to date with the technology and the tools, or they'll get left behind. So teaching them how to stay up to date, and how to keep a lookout for the trends, and how to identify, what the world is doing, what they're asking for in job descriptions and things like that, and comparing that to what they have on their resume, what they have in their portfolio or their reel, or however they're presenting their body of work, is really important too, to constantly be leveling up their skill set and their game, so to speak. So that's what I have to say about that.
Well, thank you, Christine, and thank you so much to all three of you. You've been just such a joy to have on as panelists. I've certainly learned a thing or two, and I'll definitely be following up to get your thoughts on some of these resources that you've talked about, especially for colleges and universities who may be underfunded. And thank you to Christine for sharing Unreal Engine in the chat. I'll just go ahead and end the panel here, and say again that we'll be scheduling our next webinar in the next few days. So please join us as we talk about our MS Learn integration demo. And of course, we have our EXL 2022 conference, which will start on July 26th and will be 2 or 3 days. Registration is open now, so please don't hesitate to sign up for that. And Dr. Elhage, Tarek, Christine, thank you so much again for being here. This was such a wonderful chance to learn more about what's going on in the academic community, what our professors and instructors are thinking as they plan for classes. And this has just been great insight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you very much.
Thank you.